Look how the stars turn on. Look how the stars turn on. When I hold you close. When I hold you close. When I hold you close. The stars turn on.
Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 8 of the Press Box, in association with the unit. So after a 4-1 defeat to Derry City at the Ryan McBride Brandywell Stadium on Friday, it was the end of the road for Stephen O'Donnell as Dundalk head coach, with his assistant Patrick Craig also departing. On this week's show, we're going to be joined by LOI Central's Johnny Ward to discuss where it all went wrong for O'Donnell and whether the interim management team of Liam Burns and Brian Garland are going to turn things around in a busy double-header weekend of fixtures, with Pat's visit in Oriel Park on Friday, followed by the rearranged match away to Bows on Monday. Firstly, Johnny, thanks for coming on, and also, I suppose, a good debate to have on the pod is that when we were listening to you guys' show last week, you were kind of very strong on that Dundalk and had no reason to nearly get rid of O'Donnell, but I suppose with the Derry result and then the decision to be made, I suppose that him and Patrick Craig did go. What did you make of the whole kind of decision and the whole process in general?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Craig. You were texting me after the podcast right last week, and I stand by what I said, but at the same time, there was a new level of despondency to Stephen's interview with the press afterwards. His interview with Adrian Taff. For me, it sounded he'd reached a level of despondency there. People started sort of messaging me. You'd wonder, is his heart in it anymore? And to be honest, though, the interview for me was kind of telling in the sense that he was just very down, I felt, and I'm not saying by any stretch that he wanted to run from the job, but I think the narrative might have changed. The fact that they were sort of beaten off the park as well by Derry, got a consolation goal, but it was another hockey, and you add that to really, really poor result against Galway United, terrible first half against Sligo Rovers, we saw in the last few weeks, and the fact that the players are struggling for confidence. But I still stand by what I say. These are the players that he brought in, the players that he could have worked on to improve. Now he's gone, and I think Stephen O'Donnell's. I disagree with James in the sense of something that he wrote recently about his managerial reputation will be badly dented by this. I don't necessarily think it will, but Dundalk itself, in terms of how the club's been run off the pitch and who would want the job right now, for me, I'd be very worried. I'd really struggle to see them not going down this season, to be honest.
Yeah, I suppose from us, this is the kind of first time us on the pod. Jimmy, you can jump in now at any time as well, but it's airtime for reflection as well, and ultimately, like the last, like Friday, I think it had to come to an end. And there's the element that he's a legendary captain. He did have a relatively great start with us. He obviously did very well with Pats as well, but there was so much stuff off the field that I will give some credit for, but I think ultimately you referenced some of the signings and stuff, and whether he is making them or not, I assume he has some sign off on these guys, and ultimately, he's a pro licensed coach and he has to coach, and having been at and watched a lot of games, we just didn't seem to have systems and stuff. And ultimately, I think, it was probably best for both parties. And it is sad that O'Donnell's gone, but I think for the club, I think you referenced potentially going down. I hugely feared that as well. I can't see where we're getting goals, where we're doing anything. So I think it's really sad, and I wish him all the best, him and Craig. But I think it just had to happen. And then we move on, I suppose, with Gartland and Burnsy now at the helm. And I know, Jimmy, you did a piece that I think Mr. Ainscough is now looking to move pretty quickly, actually, and get a new man in for the Sligo game, potentially.
Yeah, I think, look, you never know with negotiations how rapidly they'll move, or there could be hiccups along the way, but it's definitely their intention to have something sooner rather than later. But I suppose just to reflect on it, I don't know if I said badly dented his reputation, but I think that was in a context of the the picture. Like I genuinely believe Stephen O'Donnell is a good coach and a good manager, and I think though, in relation to going back to Friday, like Johnny referenced the interview done with Adrian Taft there, and like I was sort of standing to one side while that was taking place, and Adrian, to be fair, gave him a few bites to put a positive spin on it, and he didn't take them. And subsequently, myself and Niall Newbury had a chat with him, and it was a lot longer, a lot more in depth. Obviously, don't put the audio out, but like he looked as if he had lost. And I actually said to him, I said, the way I phrased it was, I said, I could be completely wrong here, Stephen, but it looks like you've lost a little bit of faith here tonight. And I think he did. I think it was I think I said at that moment that maybe if he was offered a way out, you never want to lose your job, but if it's not working, it's obviously very stressful. Like, there's a human element I genuinely felt from on Friday night, because ultimately he is a good guy. But I did write a piece today just sort of reflect on, I suppose, how we got here, and I suppose that's debatable. But like, I have a lot of sympathy from him for the point of view that, I don't want to keep banging on about previous owners who aren't there, but I do believe they badly let him down, for the simple reason that, as he rightly pointed out 7 days before that Derry match, he gave up a lot to come to Oriel Park in the first place. He, the easy thing to do was stay at Pats. They'd just come second in the league. They just won a cup. But he was sold a dream, and I suppose we all were excited at that stage, the club back in local hands. It was sort of, the Disney sort of appointment, for want of a better term, where you have the former captain coming back who had led you into so many battles, and here he was coming back. And to be fair to Stevie, he year one, he more than held up his end of the bargain, where he came in. I think there was Andy Boyle was the only real senior player signed. I think Ryan O'Kane and Mayo and Amasahun were there as well, but very much young players. And he put together a squad that, we went up to Tala that August, and I think if we had a 1, we were 3 points behind them. Didn't transpire, but he still came third/joint second on goal difference back into Europe. And at that point, it was the point where the club should have kicked on. It's at that point where the club should have been, fulfilling its ambition to get back to, easier said than done, but get back to challenging for honours, get back to being European regulars, etc. Because the big thing Dundalk had going for it above anyone else, and potentially still does if it could get back there, their European coefficient is huge. That, it's worth a couple of buys, which are massive in terms of getting through rounds in Europe. That's obviously a faraway dream now, but the off-field sort of messing and lack of, I still go back to, like, that interview where they're basically denying selling the club when they'd been out at the Qatar World Cup trying to flog it at that stage. Obviously the Hull thing massively blew up on their faces when basically Hull let the cat out of the bag. But the long and short of all that was, and listen, if they want it out, they want it out, that's fine. But for 2 years in a row, Stevie O'Donnell and Dundalk were the last team to sign a player. Dara Keane, who ironically only actually made his debut off the bench on Friday night, is the only player in the last 2 years we've signed from within the league. And I made the point today that, like, why do you appoint someone like Stephen O'Donnell as your manager? Well, yeah, there's the connection with the club, but you appoint him because he had shown managerial potential at Pats, but also he knows he's a winner. He knows what it takes to win this league, to compete in this league. He said as much himself to us after the game that, you need to be winning your duels. You need to be doing this, that, and the other to win matches. And we're just not doing it. I think we said to him, I said, that's not a team in your image, which he agreed with. And I have sympathy for him because we appointed a manager who knew the league, knew the players in it, and he wasn't given an opportunity to sign within that league for various reasons. And, like, there's no doubt, listen, I don't want to put blame on players. But when you go into a market you don't know, you're not an expert in it. It's like people will listen to the likes of this and LOI Central because they somewhat value our opinion on maybe Dundalk or League of Ireland football. But if we did a podcast tomorrow on, I know myself, I listen to other League of Ireland pods and they go and they start talking about Man United and Liverpool, and I don't want to hear it because it's a bit like I listen to Vinton O'Toole talk politics, but I don't want to hear him talk cricket. And we effectively hired an expert, and Brian Gartland comes into this as well because I know he's getting a lot of stick at the moment. And again, another guy with a background in the league, but they're shopping in a market they don't know. And I had a lot of sympathy for them for that reason, because you're taking chances on players. Ultimately, listen, no one can say that it didn't work out. Not every manager gets signings right. It's a hard enough thing, even when you go through the league. But I compare it to a Shells, and just because they're top of the table at the minute. And Johnny will confirm this, but if you look at the spine of that Shells team at the moment, like Conor Cairns, I don't think, Johnny, it's fair to say no one was complaining when he left Galway. Their centre back pairing, Paddy Barrett, let go by Pats. I think Gavin Malloy was let go by Bowes a few years ago. You go through, JJ Lunny was let go by Pats as well, and other clubs. Mark Coyle was playing at Finn Harps. Sean Boyd was on the scrap heap through injury. But that's a spine of their team, and it's a spine of experienced players who know the league, who know what they're doing. And then you supplement it with the likes of your Will Jarvises, your Harry Wood last year, your Liam Burt this year. Players from outside the league who add that bit of something. But we were trying to do it the opposite way around, where we weren't giving them an opportunity to sign lads who knew Irish football, who knew League of Ireland football, who knew, maybe had even 50 games under their belt, and expecting them to perform. And a lot of that is, look, you can't say all the signings worked out, because they absolutely did not. But that's where I feel he was let down, because there's no way that's what he signed up for. And I saw this coming. I reflected it. I sent it on to you the weekend, Craig. Ironically, after the Galway defeat in the Cup last year, I said we're on a one-way ticket as we stand towards relegation within 2 to 3 seasons. I probably didn't expect it this soon, but it was so predictable to me because of the way the thing was being run, and the way, and I'll let you come in, sorry, because I know I'm probably on a bit of a monologue, but it was, for me, he's a good manager, but the environment, I think anyone would have struggled in.
And do you think that, Johnny? Are you thinking maybe he was sold a bit of a dud, or, with the players? The only thing about the players, and sorry I know, Johnny, I want you to come in, but the players, I get your point, but I also think there's clubs like Waterford, Hearts, people go outside of the Irish market as well. He still has to have an ability to coach guys.
Yeah, no, they do, Craig, but they don't solely rely on it, is what I'm saying. And yeah, I'm not being anti-UK market or whatever, but it should be a supplement rather than, I give the Shells example because, Damien Duff, what he's done, it's almost Kenny-esque in terms of, taking players who, I don't want to say were unwanted elsewhere, because that's unfair to them, but, there's certain players in and around that Shells team that, you wouldn't be screaming out at as, these are must have for your squad or whatever, but he's made them into a really formidable team to beat, and challengers at this stage, and that's what Stephen Kenny did. That's the sort of environment that I suppose Bohemians knew when Stephen O'Donnell was a player there, what Rovers were doing. Rovers, that great Rovers team that he was part of, that won in Belgrade, etc. They only supplemented it with the likes of Twig and a few others, but it was a team that knew League of Ireland football. And then again with Dundalk, with Kenny, solid people who knew the League of Ireland, albeit picking the likes of stars here and there and getting more out of them. So it's very hard to do that when you're taking chances on people who you've probably only seen video clips of. I know what you're saying. He needs to get more out from a coaching capacity, but it didn't help. It definitely didn't help. in my opinion, the environment he was in.
Johnny, do you, I suppose, to bring you in here, do you think he got sold any sort of a dud, or especially what James is saying now with maybe the market and the guys that he had coming in, or would you agree, or do you think maybe he needed to get a bit more out of the lads?
Okay, well, I was thinking this during the week, like when I went back to when it was sort of being reported that he could leave Pats after the cup, like, and I'll be honest, like, I think some of the things that I said probably annoyed Stephen at the time as well, where I'm not exactly sure, but I think I back Gareth Kelleher in terms of how much money he put into St. Patrick's Athletic, and he's there a long time. But it is clear that their relationship utterly broke down, and anyone can see that now. But for him to leave what Pats was building to at that time to go to Dundalk should be a small provincial club. It's as simple as that. And I say that as a Galway United fan from a club that is from a city that has a lot more people than Dundalk, has never really achieved anything bar a cup final win 33 years ago. And Dundalk has massively punched above its weight. But in terms of the upside going forward, given how the state of Oriel and what Dundalk would need to do to maintain the consistency they had in the Kenny era, it was a very, very big move. And I'm not saying Pats without Gareth Kelleher wouldn't necessarily be all that straightforward either. And he is a sugar daddy to all extent, intents and purposes. But it was a big, big move. And I've spoken a bit to James about this. The ownership thing, I didn't take an awful lot of notice of it throughout the time that I was there. I'm not close to Dundalk. It's one of the clubs that I'm not in Oriel very often and all of that. But like when you get into a situation now where if it were to believe that the club has gone from the situation pre-peak 6 of whatever it made 5 or 6 million in those days to now own the guts of 750,000, you add in the fact that if you look at the League of Ireland now, it's gotten to a stage where with UCD out of the league, there really aren't any basket case clubs there, and the minimum standard, which is give or take Galway United, Waterford, Drogheda, Sligo, they're fairly solid teams from last season, and Drogheda are very well coached and they're building on something. And also, if you look at the Drogheda team and the players that they have, the leaders in that team, you look at the Dundalk team that took to the pitch at the Brandywell. There are literally no leaders in that team. Like Boyle didn't start. If you fuse together as well, the key sort of experienced players, and I say this without having seen, I saw them against Drogheda and against Shamrock Rovers and bits in between, but the key experienced players that Stephen O'Donnell needed to rely on this season for me aren't playing very well, either individually or collectively. They just look a little bit off it. Then you add in a load of players who are unproven, inexperienced, and coming into an environment where there's kind of if not hostility, there's not a particular happiness in the stands, because this is a Dundalk crowd that's used to winning leagues, not scrapping at the bottom. You throw all that in there, and a manager who clearly himself probably isn't performing to his best ability because he's really feeling pressure here for the first time. You throw all that together, and you've no UCD in the league. You get a situation where Dundalk deservedly are bottom of the table, and that's kind of what it is. But like he has 3 kids, like, so I wasn't there, and it's interesting what you're saying there, James, about the Brandywell. But like Stephen O'Donnell, by what's happened today, obviously he will get some financial compensation out of it, and he'll be able to sort of reframe where his career is going. Whereas if he still had this job ahead of the 2 games coming up, I don't know if he'd be confident that he could get them out of it, because he sounded that despondent at the Brandywell. And it's a good league, Dan referenced this in the podcast last week, that there isn't like this ready-made kind of Neil Warner character who's going to come in and patch things up. Because if you brought in Pep Guardiola to this Dundalk team, he's going to face a challenge in terms of how badly down on confidence they are, how underperforming some of their players are. Some James has written about this, that he maybe backed players too much that have been injury prone and are coming towards sort of maybe the end of their careers, and there's all of that added into it. But the league is quite decent now. Like they're well coached teams who kind of know what they're doing, and I'm looking at everyone else in the league and looking at the inconsistency of Galway United. And us taking points, going up to Derry, but then losing to Bows, who lost either side of that. The teams, apart from Dundalk right now, from my perspective, are going to be taking points off each other week in, week out. I don't see that from I could see Dundalk falling so far behind that they won't have it. They don't really look like they have it in them. And one thing I would say about Stevie, and I think he probably will reflect on this a bit himself. He hasn't been a brilliant manager of strikers, right? And that's been an issue. Even with Pats, he kind of made some mistakes with his strikers. And Dundalk, for love nor money, they do not look like scoring goals. And that draw of the game when they were down to 10 men, I'd no confidence at all that they were going to score. And that's probably an aspect of it as well. But I do wonder, and maybe James can come in on this. Did he get the vibe himself that Stevie almost was half willing this to happen, because his reputation, the narrative around Dundalk will be around what happens subsequent to this. So Steve O'Donnell's reputation will be dependent on what happens under the two lads who've come in, and they've taken a risk, in my view, by coming in here, because it was said to me yesterday that it's a no-lose situation for Brian Gartland. I wouldn't agree with that. I think Brian Gartland has taken a bit of a risk, but it was interesting speaking to another guy who theoretically could be in the running for this, and he was like, absolutely no chance would I go in there. So I think there's a recognition among would-be managers and managers that this is not, if Stephen O'Donnell were sold a pup, what you're being sold now is far from what it looked to be 2 years ago when he got the job.
Yeah, and I say that because on that, John, and go back to your original point about Dundalk being a provincial club that punched above his weight. You're 100% right on that, but it was being sold at the time. I think even Dan on your old pod was talking up about the potential impact of stat sports, etc. And Stevie
What
O'Donnell
happens?
wouldn't. Well, they lost interest for various. Maybe look, you could go into a lot of detail, but they didn't run it as a going concern at all, and they did lose interest. We were
I
more.
prefer us not to be sued before you continue, Jim.
I don't think you can sue for that, but they were more absentee than the Americans. That it went from sort of ultimate micromanagement to no management. But the long and short of it was that, what you were saying about Dundalk punching above the weight, you're right, but it was sold as this sort of we were all excited. There's no point in saying, one thing or another, but whatever initial conversations had with Stevie O'Donnell was, there's no way he give up Pats for this, for example. Whereas if you come in now, at least who, and someone will take the job, you're in a relegation fight. You're even potentially looking, because I'm sure whoever does take will be saying, right, well, if I don't keep them up, I want next season to try and get them back up. And that's going to be just naturally part of conversations. But look, he did make mistakes along the way. There's no point, but every manager will. But you're right about the goal scoring thing, because
that's what I want to bring in Patrick Hoban. He made that call, and we can't score a goal now. And
yeah. Look, that was it. Look, it was a poor call. But I think ultimately the confidence just got to everyone. And I make the point, having the likes of me around probably doesn't help, because I'll pull out stats that maybe other clubs aren't aware. But when you fall behind, we fell behind in 28 of our 44 league matches going back to the start of last season. It's too high a number, and you factor in even this season we've had 2 scoreless draws. So we're very rarely taking the lead in a game. And okay, we did show an ability last season to fight back in certain matches, but this year you go 1-0 down, and we as fans are saying that, where are you getting an equaliser from, let alone 2? That has to be the belief of the players too, because I know when we've all worked at workplaces where you rate your colleagues, someone's going to do a job well, or someone's going to do it half-assed or whatever. And I'm not saying they're doing a half-assed, but you just wonder where the goals are coming from. And that's going to be the struggle going forward now too, because look, I think you can make us harder to beat. The application, I think, can be better. You go back to the first goal in Derry the other night, Cone Ostenbrink just basically gives up on chasing McMullen down the right wing, and that's application. That's that's that. I know it's a cliche, but that's that extra 10% that you need to be putting in. That just isn't there at the moment. But
I think as well, James, if you're bringing in that that amount of players, and you're saying that amount of players effectively, whether it's from videos, whether it's from stats, whether it's from that, you can't character vet every player like that to the extent
No.
that you would want to. And you can't, like, if Jamie and Duff signed players when the league, I'd slightly contradiction what you were saying about Conor Kearns, that I was very happy with Conor Kearns going out. Most of the time he didn't have anything to do, and I think he feels that he's benefited from going to Shells. But I didn't necessarily see what Damien Duff saw, because Conor Kearns didn't have much to do in games. But Damien Duff was able to sign within the league. And if you can't sign all this, like, Dundalk have nearly 30 players in their squad list, looking at the website at the minute, you can't sign that amount of players and properly know what you're getting.
No, I agree with you, and that's the risk, where there's more of a sort of, listen, you could sign Messi and he could be a flop in theory. We've all seen, like, at a higher level, there's good players have went to clubs and for whatever reason it just didn't work out. That's football. It'll happen everywhere. But I do think that there's more of a sure bet when you can. Conor Kearns is a bad example because Stevie, I think, let him go from Pats. But they, if you wanted to sign someone from even a Cove Ramblers now or something, you can make phone calls and get a bit of information on them, and they're people you know and trust. And it's a bit like anything, word of mouth recommendation is still the best form of anything. Like, if I said to you tomorrow, where's the best restaurant in Dublin 8, I would trust your guidance to send me to a decent spot. And it's the same with football. When you start going into markets you don't know, dealing with people you don't know, like, I made the point to someone today, and I'm sure we will debate it later, who is the replacement. But someone like a James Simmons is as good a manager as anyone for us right now, if we're going to continue signing from the UK market. And you're probably saying to me, who's James Simmons? He's an Irish guy, former under-21 cap, 36 years of age, assistant manager to Chelsea under-23s. And I only say that for the simple reason that, and I don't know this guy from Adam, but if he, for example, if we're going to be keeping signing from England and that's the club policy, well, at least he'll know players at that sort of level. He knows that market. He will hopefully have contacts there. He's managed in Norway. He's been assistant at MK Dons under Toriander Flo briefly. And that's the sort of manager you should be looking at if that's what you want, if that's what you're going to sign your players from, because he'll have a better idea of it. Or someone like that should certainly be part of your team. But if you are after a League of Ireland manager, and I think most fans would be of the view we need someone who knows the league, you need to give them an option to try and sign within that league. You won't get every target.
They did try to sign people in the league, man. They did try.
But we weren't at the races, realistically. And in relation to no, but even in the last couple of seasons, we were so far behind. Like when, in unchallenged interviews, when Sean O'Connor's coming out and saying, "Oh, we got every player on our board" and stuff like this that we were after signing, when you've only signed 4 players and you've a squad of about 13, like, who are you codding? Like, it's just not factual. Like, there's no way Stephen O'Donnell didn't want players within the league or trying to get them or whatever.
But you said about your man McCormick that went to Waterford. He just signed for Waterford. They had a better deal or whatever. Like, what? Like, whether it's
a bit more to that one, but yeah,
maybe. But okay, and there's other guys you reference as well. Like, so he's obviously tried to go for these guys and the club and stuff. So that's their situation financially and stuff. That's
Stevie did have a good reputation, I think, in terms of, like, he did rate Ben McCormick, but like, there's no doubt players would look at Dundalk and they'd be offered better money at Derry, or they could stay in Dublin. And this goes back to where Dundalk is as a club. I'm interested to know as well what did you make of his backroom team? Because, like, you can say what you like about Damien Duff did this at Shell. Damien Duff is Damien Duff and Joey O'Brien, as far as I'm concerned. And they probably had, was it Paul Skinner, the goalkeeping coach, who would have come in and said, like, listen, we recommend, because I can't imagine Damien Duff's an expert on goalkeepers. So, like, what was the crack with Padge Craig? Or, like, anecdotally, it didn't sound like Dundalk had the beefiest sort of backroom team in terms of management behind him either.
Yeah, it's to be fair, I'd say Padge Craig could probably walk down the street of Dundalk without Dundalk gear on, and most people wouldn't know who he is. He never really did interviews or engaged with the media or anything like that, so it's difficult to assess. Hindsight being a great thing, like, I know him and Stevie are great mates, etc. maybe they're a bit too similar. I don't know. Maybe you needed someone different. That's hindsight being 2020. You know, I know there was criticism towards the end of maybe different elements of the coaching thing. I don't want to necessarily kick people when they're down, etc. But you can't ignore that. And now, again, there's also a thing, it's the easiest thing in the world to blame the manager. The players now have to step up as well. But yeah, look, if you could do things differently, you maybe would have had something a little bit different in there. But in relation to Padge, we probably didn't know him as a, I say that for myself, but I say that as the fan base at the whole, where, you know, he didn't put himself, like I go back to, you know, even when John Gill was in charge, you know, Jerry Scully would regularly do sort of media or even chat to the media kind of in an off the record sort of way. Vinnie Perth obviously did when he was assistant Stephen Kenny. You go through it over the years, and there's always been that, you know, even when Vinny was in charge, you had Rory Higgins there, you had John Gill again, and they could talk to you. You could do interviews with them. You could just get a vibe of them all. I don't even mean for publication purposes. That relationship was never there with Padge. So in terms of it wouldn't be my call to say how good, bad, or effective or ineffective he was. But certainly he didn't probably ever, and maybe he never sought to, but he never was someone who warmed himself to the Dundalk fan base, I would say.
Yeah, I suppose. Listen, I said James is a lot closer in that sense for me. So I talk from solely as a fan base. Obviously, Padge, you know, very similar to what James said. The general fan didn't hear much from him in that sense. I know Liam Burns, who's now obviously taken over, was a coach, but what was he, a community officer beforehand? Now, again, he has Leave Ireland experience, and I don't know the level of coaching experience he has, but I know he was involved. But again, I don't know, did like Stevie pick that, or was that just the kind of a, like, this guy's here and he's on the wage bill and, you know, get him involved. So again, with that, and then Brian Gartland, who obviously O'Donnell would have known and played with, is I don't know, head of operations or whatever, and was kind of involved as well. And to be fair, one of the things that didn't help maybe Craig as well, and to be fair, I'm not going to put used to in it, but journalists would always say like O'Donnell and his assistant Gartland, and a few journalists, not just one that's wrong about a lot of stuff, but like a few people that would like, oh, Gartland's as his assistant and stuff, and it just wasn't true and stuff. So the thing about Craig, he never came out and kind of did his own piece and stuff. But like, I think the background, he obviously chose Craig, but there was no other budget for any other coaches, and I think the goalkeeping coach changed as well under his tenure as well. So like, it did seem that he had him and Padge, and I think the rest
Dom
of it.
Corrigan's another involved in the back room as analyst and scout, and would have been heavily involved, I suppose, not centrally, but in the recruiting and match preparation. It was always a sort of frustration of mine, and listen, Stevie's not here to defend himself on it, but we never did opposition analysis to the level I thought, in terms of, like, for example, I give the example recently, the night we got the 5-0 kicking off Sligo, if we could ever forget it. Mark Rossiter's in the stand doing work for Pats, you know, analysing the game, and at the same night, Pats are playing Waterford, who they literally were next to opponents, and we've no one there. And, you know, there's an element of, right, you can do, you know, video analysis, etc. But sometimes, even in journalism, which is sadly struggling to a large extent, there's still a reason why to send reporters to a live game as opposed to cover it off TV, because you see and notice things at a live event that you don't on TV, and you get a better impression of things. And I do think little things, but I don't want to go into the nitty gritty about, you know, and maybe start hammering him over things he didn't do. Listen, any manager to lose his job, needless to say, is going to have had a few mistakes along the way.
What's in it for the owner, though? Like, what's in it for the owner now? And how he's talking about bringing in investors. Like, what is the upside for getting involved in Dundalk at the moment? Because so you've obviously got a bloated wage bill. The likelihood of finishing in the bottom two at best, I would have said. And what's the upside in an absolute kip of a ground that needs millions of money to put it anywhere near where it should be? What's the upside to get involved in this now?
Well, poor Brian Ainscott must feel like he drove over a black cat or a litter of them or something, because even he was in Derry the other night, and meanwhile Kerry are I think Kerry are in a 6-match unbeaten run, but
Yeah,
Kerry are
5
having
draws and a win. Yeah.
a resounding win, and you probably would have got good odds on Kerry having a league win on the board first over Dundalk at the start of the season. But look, again, you talk about regret. I'm sure he has had a few sleepless nights wondering what he's got himself into. And some of it was obvious. Like, listen, everyone knows Oriel isn't necessarily fit for purpose, or certainly needs mass improvement. But to be fair to him, he's tried. I think even, I do believe it pained him to get rid of Stevie at the weekend. I think he tried to give him as long as possible. I think Stevie in the end, he probably knew that the time was up. But he's trying to do the right things. Like, even I believe there's an announcement on the way that they're going to get the work done to the YDC that will reopen that as a facility. It's been closed to the public for the last number of years due to fire safety issues. So even getting that resolved, it opens up a massive potential revenue driver for the club. So to be fair to Brian, and he's probably had to make a few tough decisions early on, but I think he's tried to do things for the most part right. Even tomorrow, I'm attending. Don't want to give too much away because I don't want to break secrets, but I'm attending an event tomorrow night myself to help organise something like a community event for the club. And so there's stuff happening that wasn't in the past, and they sound like such simple things, but when that wasn't taking place for so long, I think you have to give them credit. And look, I think anyone who gets involved in football has to have a bit of a screw loose to a certain extent, because particularly in League of Ireland, how you ever expect to make a profit from it? And he doesn't have that connection with the area in the way that, like, say, if Philip O'Doherty has up in Derry or whatever.
It is a fair question, though. Like, when you actually think about it, forgetting the O'Donnell scenario and all, when you do think about when he comes in, and fair enough, maybe there's a big dream of something, but like, in the grand scheme of things, if you're putting your money and potentially and other people's money and stuff, like, if you're investing, as in you're looking for your return on investment, you do think, Jesus, like, you're putting yourself under a lot of pressure. And you reference like Philip O'Doherty. Okay, fair enough, he's a billionaire, but like, if he wasn't and he was just this local guy, and you're trying, yeah, I kind of get it. But like, yeah, the Ainscough thing, it's like fair play to him. We'll take it if he can try sort things out and stuff. But like, you do wonder, you go, what is actually in this for him? Like, and bar maybe, like, I don't know, a challenge or something, but like, it surely won't be for bottom line profit come year on year. Like,
yeah, the League of Ireland is funny though, like, because collectively it's losing money, and Rovers would say Shamrock Rovers lost maybe 2 million last year, and you're looking at Dundalk, Derry City, St. Patrick's losing money, but like, there's still plenty of upside potentially. Like, the guys that got involved in Drogheda, they are getting involved with the view to just becoming successful. They are, and like, when I spoke to Conor Hoey last year, like, they had done massive due diligence. They're like, this adds up, primarily because now Drogheda's an interesting example to relative to Dundalk, because they're obviously quite close to each other, but Drogheda's the hinterland, the proximity to Dublin, and so on and so forth. But they also, like, the League of Ireland, by and large, like, it's not a very it doesn't cost that much to run a League of Ireland club relative to clubs around Europe. Like, in England, they'd laugh at the money we're spending on everything pretty much. Even from third and fourth tier, they'd still say the League of Ireland is small fry. And like, I think League of Ireland nurseries, like, say, the underage, cost maybe 200 or 300 grand a year. It's still very little money, and as far as I'm concerned. Now, the problem is there's no imminent TV deal, and there's no imminent sort of money coming from the FAI, but I still believe the League of Ireland has massive potential, and I think it has huge upside where it's going in terms of interest and on a European level, and Brexit as well. Like, it's been brought up before, but like, if you have the likes of Evan Ferguson going for 100 million, which actually looks a lot less likely than it did a few months ago, like, Bowes could make, we'll say, 15 million or whatever. So if you hit the jackpot with one player, it can work out. And I still think there's a lot of upside. But when you go from owning one club to owning another, neither of which you have an affinity with, I'm just asking, I don't know what I don't really know what his motivation is. And I'm not saying it's bad. I just don't know what he thinks he will get out of it, because Dundalk to me is one that has more downside than upside compared to, say, the likes of Galway United.
Yeah. Well, I think, to be fair, he was asked that at his press conference, like why get involved, and I think he, as a sort of guy, obviously Dubliner by birth, etc., but living in America, I think those sort of that Irish American community identify with Ireland a lot more, and it was probably his link to home and doing it. And I'm not saying with Brian necessarily, but as a whole, is there a wider sort of, gamble's maybe the wrong word, but that this will turn, that there will be investment in the long term, that there will be, say, money there for infrastructure, and that it'll lead to better facilities, better academies, etc. And then potentially, if I do believe in the morning, if Oriel Park's a better ground, it is better crowds, which is more revenue. Is there a gamble on the Evan Ferguson sort of factor, as you mentioned, that if a club, and not just Dundalk but any club, produces a player of caliber, that, well, the rewards are huge if they end up going for the sort of transfer fees, which are probably only rising cross channel. I'm speculating, of course, but it's all that, and probably more the challenge, the excitement. I think when you go
wealthy
into
Irish
things,
Americans as well, James. Wealthy Irish Americans will look at the League of Ireland and say that's not a lot of money for what it could be.
Exactly. And look, I think you go into this, all these things with a glass half full sort of optimism. I know you, for example, have invested in racehorses before. When you're saying, will I put my money into this, you're dreaming of the big day out and the glory of a big win and maybe selling it on, etc. You're not dreaming of like the horse running like a cow and having to be put down or something, or that's, which is a sad reality of it. But
all of which happens.
Yeah. So, but you'd never do it if you thought that way. But so you're probably looking at it, Doc, saying, well, he was looking at a club that missed out on Europe on, look, it was probably done before that, but mathematically missed out on Europe on the final day. You must remember, and it was a kind of similar fixture last weekend where Shells and Drogheda, and Shells are beating them at half time. Or Drogheda's beating Shells at half time, and at that moment, okay, Dundalk weren't beating UCD, but second half, and if you can get the job done, you're thinking, geez, we could be in Europe here. And that was the I suppose the minor nature of how much Dundalk missed out in Europe last year. So he's probably thinking, yeah, we can get into this, and with, as I say, with the coefficient, you're better seeded, you've better chance of winning matches. As I say, the rewards in Europe are huge, and why wouldn't anyone want to be part of that if you had the interest in owning a club? But
well, there was that very interesting moment earlier in the season where Stevie calls out his European aspiration by basically bluntly saying, I don't see why anyone would see that we're candidates for Europe this season, which I thought was quite mad. Even I didn't know much about what Dundalk were going to be this season, but it was quite clear that there was a chasm in terms of expectation. And I don't think it was genuinely Stevie playing it down. I think he looked at things coldly and he said, Europe's probably beyond us this season.
Well, it certainly looks that way. I don't think he was wrong on that, to be fair. So it's look, maybe it's like anything you can do again, and I don't want to be like, some of them haven't even played half a dozen matches, so you don't want to write off lads before they've had a proper run. And again, in this league where you play, within 7 days the Dundalk will play 3 matches, and I don't know, maybe Jamie Gullen turns into a goal machine or whatever. I don't want to pick out individual players, but when you're looking at videos of players, you don't really get a grasp of them until you're dealing with them day to day on the pitch and what they're made of and that. And look, no manager goes out to sign a player thinking they're going to be a bad signing. But maybe he knew that there was something lacking with the squad. He's obviously not going to say that publicly, but when he assessed it and what the levels were like or whatever, But certainly yeah, he wasn't wrong in his assessment that we've no right to be anywhere near Europe. I think, like I said at the start of the season, I would have taken 7th or so this season if it led to a sort of year of progression off the field. And that's sort of happening to an extent, but can only dream of 7th right now.
Right, well, the thing people will want to listen to. Boys' thoughts on people to come in. So there's a few names and stuff, and I see like a few listeners kind of tweeted and stuff like that, and then different things on Oreo Web and stuff. The first one, the return of Vinny. What would you think of that?
I'd imagine Vinny is one of the people who would take the job because he's quite long without having a job for all that his CV arguably reads well. Like regardless of, he was assistant Stephen Kenny, but thereafter, as much as he had a good squad, he did a perfectly competent job as Dundalk manager. Now he's been out of the game a while, but the general consensus from people I would talk in the game is that Vinny, would want a job like this and go back. To be honest, apart from that, I don't see many people in the league. Gary Cronin, I'd say, would be interested in it because he's newly out of work. He wants to be a manager. His interview on our podcast certainly got a reaction. And it's clear
It's
that he
funny,
wants.
that was very good. And I actually was on to you about that, to be fair. I thought it was very good. But then you're thinking about now what Brian Ainscough is looking for. So Vinny came in and saved us before. So there's other guys, I know he's in work, but you've guys like Ollie Horgan or even a Liam Buckley, guys like this. Is that the kind of guy we go in and try get a 6-month deal? Keep us up, lads. Or do you, as you say, if you get a Gary Cronin, you get an Andy Myler or like Collie O'Neill, any of these guys, and say, right, we want to maybe try build something. So here's 2 years or something like, yeah, if we go down, you come up, or is it just get a kind of Sam Allardyce type and just keep us up? And that's, I suppose, the decision that Brian Ainscough has now.
Yeah, like it's not possible that these players collectively are all useless either. Like the Dogs still have good players, and if they could get if they get their core players back, like Darren Horgan's like lack of form for me is really, really strange. Like, because I know that he's relying a bit on pace, but like, Jesus, like I listened to your podcast after Shamrock Rovers game, and I think you said the line something like, Craig, I'm not saying we're going to win the league, but there was enough that night to show that, like, there was enough that
That's
night
where
to
it
show
all
that,
went wrong.
yeah, but you know what I mean? I was listening that night, I was like, and you never read too much into the first game, but like these Dundalk players, they look like there's something about them. So it's not like it's a hopeless situation. But within Ireland, the two guys I mentioned for me would both at least be willing to talk about potentially getting this job. But I mean I don't know what the recruitment process is going to be here. Who's gonna make the call on this? Who are the football people making the call? Does Brian Gartlin want the job long term? I don't know. I messaged him best of luck yesterday, the day before. I hadn't heard back from him yet. I don't know where his headspace is at the moment. But I would definitely feel that there would be a reluctance among the greater League of Ireland population, which itself is small, that there's a lot of downside to this job because it's not going to be straightforward, and the Dundalk is trading on glories and reputation rather than anything else at the moment. And so I it's a bit like the Ireland job, to be honest. I couldn't call who's going to get it.
Jimmy?
Well, Johnny asked a question of Brian Gartlin. I don't think that's a runner just purely on a licensing term, apart from anything else. Just he is only the B license. I think Liam is only the C license. In theory, Dundalk have done it too many times with getting a pro license holder, shall we say, to be on the staff. But I think if they were going to go that route, Dave Mackey's still involved roughly around the club. So I think if they wanted to go that route, they could have already. I don't think it's a runner from that point of view. What I'm led to believe is that they're hoping to have an appointment quite soon. So that suggests to me there is someone lined up. Heard a few names mentioned. I wouldn't say any are concrete, but it's you mentioned Vinny. I don't think it'll be Vinny. I think the club could definitely do worse than Vinny. I think he got a bit of a bad rap, and I think it's a great pity that, ultimately a league winner. And I know the accusation to be thrown that it was Stephen Kenny's squad or whatever, but he's still, apart from Stephen Bradley, the second last manager to win a league in this country. Hasn't got another chance somewhere. I definitely think he's something to offer. Whether it's this or not, I don't know. I think there's probably people there wouldn't want to work with him, or maybe he wouldn't want to work with them. So that's a potential issue on that front. So look, it's a difficult one. I think Mark Kennedy's been interested. Someone who linked before. Heard Ian Barraclough mentioned, who I think could be a really good appointment. I think he's at Cheltenham Town as assistant at the moment, but again, only an assistant role, and it's only till the end of the season, which is rapidly approaching. So I don't know if that would be a major hindrance in terms of him taking it. Again, if you look at his body of work with Sligo, probably knows what it is to manage a provincial club and stuff. I'm not saying he gets it, by the way, but just names that are sort of being linked to it. Paddy McLaughlin was another one. Obviously, he was assistant at Derry up until the start of the year, linked with it as well. There's probably no obvious, I give the view, probably roughly this time last year or whatever, if it had happened, and maybe I'm slightly out of my timelines there, but there was definitely a point where, say, Keith Long was unemployed, and if the job came up and Keith Long's unemployed, he's the obvious one, also as a connection with the club, having won a league here as a player. There isn't that, for me anyway, unless I'm missing someone, that obvious candidate. I actually think we probably need a John Caulfield type in a way, who's obviously not available. Just that sort of, will make you hard to beat and stubborn, and, probably has that bit of experience and calmness, for want of a better word, that, I think could be brilliant in a sort of relegation battle, which it probably is. But look, there's 28 games left as well. Easier said than done, but if someone can come in and get a tune out of these guys, there's enough. You're only 4 points off ninth. It's not insurmountable either. It's a big challenge. I'm not going to deny that, but this is why I think the decision probably had to happen at this stage before it sort of, hypothetically, the Dundalk have 2 games this weekend, obviously to play Pats Friday night, but they've that game in hand against Bows on Monday. I think Bows are sitting on 10 points, Dundalk are on 3. You go to Dalymount and win. It's a game changer in terms of your overall belief strategy, and I know that's easier said than done, but we'll see. Sometimes managers can bring about a lift, and you mentioned Daryl Horgan there, but across the board, there's definitely players, and we would have discussed it last week, where I'd say Zach Johnson aside, I don't think anyone could be sort of happy with their overall input so far this season. It's very early in the season, and some of them we don't know because they're relatively new players to us, but some of them we do know, and they are a lot better than that, and they need to show it now. Whether they will or not remains to be seen.
Yeah, I suppose that with the run that you're talking about, again, my fears, you're right, if there's 28 games left, but we've 3 games in 7 days, and I hope I'm completely wrong, but I can't see us exactly getting 3 wins there, and then if Drogheda have a kind of a knack of getting points and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden I'm thinking right, well, we'll need a kind of run of 4 or 5 wins at least, and I just don't see that happening. But again, whoever comes in, that's their job, and to be fair, they wouldn't be getting the job if they didn't believe in that.
No, but you start with the first one. And again, easier said than done. I know Pats have ironically picked up a bit of form themselves, but if you get that sort of bounce and you come away Friday night and you beat Pats, you're going up the road to Dalymount all of a sudden with a bit of a pep in your step and a new belief. Now, it doesn't mean you go there and win, but football's a strange game too. You don't know. And look, confidence is at a real low, or has been at a real low, and at some point that if they're going to get out of this, it has to turn. And maybe it just takes that first win to do it. I mean, like Johnny, you were sort of in this predicament as a Galway fan in 2017. I think, am I right in saying it was game day 10 took for Galway to get the first win that year when Shane Keegan was in charge? Like, you know, where you feel it'll never come.
Yeah, although I think I'm not sure that's really a comparable situation. From what I recall, that win was actually against Stephen Kenny's Dundalk.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, and like we actually ultimately went down that season, and Shane Keegan then kind of like, you know, it was a lot of sliding doors moments that season. This was a team with good players that just conceded kind of too many goals, and as you said, 10 games in or whatever, it took us that long to get a win that we were sort of playing catch up. I think we had the record of the most points per team that got relegated or whatever, but it was one of those leagues where 3 teams went down. But I don't think there were any real panic stations that season, and we did get relegated, but we had plenty about us. We had good players. The one thing that I would look at, is there a possibility that like one of the other teams, the likes of a Galway, Sligo, Drogheda or Waterford, would slip down a little bit. And like it's still very, very early days. Like if Dundalk had beaten Drogheda, that's a 3-point swing already. That you know, and things would look quite different. And it's far from a hopeless position. But you know, my initial kind of correspondences with people within the league after Stevie was let go was that there's certainly a reluctance out there among people to jump at this job, because there's definitely a good bit of downside to it, I think. And football is so fickle now that you know, most managers don't get a second go at it. There aren't that I'm looking at our you know, tonight, looking at our mailbag, and they're on about the O'Donnell, Clancy, Higgins you know, insurance firms. Tim Clancy and Stephen O'Donnell have both been let go from their jobs since we started that insurance firm, and Rory Higgins has probably been under little bits of pressure himself. It's a very, very tough league at the moment, and as much as most people would, you know, they'll know that this is a good opportunity in some respects because there are very few jobs out there. The upside versus the downside is a hard one to weigh up. And you look at the finances of Dundalk as well would be a worry for me, where if you're coming in as with the peak 6 wage structure and all that, and there's a lot of money swimming around, that's one thing. But Dundalk are in debt at the moment, to my understanding. And, you know, it's not inconceivable that there'll be a lot of sort of tension behind the scenes if things go badly straight away, because the morale is low, and you know, it's the dress room is low, and it's a bunch of players that from my perspective, they look like they're favourites to finish bottom, and it's very, very hard to see two teams finishing below them. So I feel that a lot of managers will be reluctant to take it on, and there aren't that many candidates off the top of my head even to take it. It's interesting, James, you're saying that they look like they might make a quick move, because I off the top of my head, I don't see a big list of candidates there.
Well, and this is probably, you know, where we're not considering. So, like, Brian Ainscough comes from a coaching background, but he's a coaching background in America. Is that? I'm not saying it is. I've no insight to that, but we've sort of seen, you know, who saw Filippo Giovagnoli coming, for example. So obviously different ownership group, different time, etc. But, you know, is there someone in America? And I know most people will dismiss that out of hand, but America is a big country. There could be someone, you know, ready to cut their teeth. It could be someone from the UK that
there's definitely someone in the UK. Like, there are millions of people in Britain wanting the job.
Yeah, so like it could be, and then there's also like Brian Ainscough is, I don't want to be ageist about it, but he's of a certain era where, and I'm not saying this is a case either, but like his era was sort of the Roddy Collins sort of time. I'm not saying it's Roddy, but is it someone of that sort of ilk? You know, it's quite a young league of managers where, you know, is that where they turn to? And I'm not saying any of that's the case, but, you know,
I would strap that to my veins for the next 6 months.
Well, I tell you, the interviews would be certainly lively. But yeah, like, and I'm not saying any of that's going to be what happens, but, you know, we are probably looking at it with somewhat blinkers on, in that we're looking at Ireland and specifically League of Ireland and who's around. But I made the point today, like it's a funny league in that you look at the managers at the moment, like Duff's in his first job, Bradley's in his first job, Higgins is in his first job, Russell's in his first job. So if it is a novice, and maybe that's not what Dundalk need right now, but it's not a league of experienced managers, let's say. You take the likes of maybe Caulfield out of it, and maybe one or two others. I know the likes of Stephen Bradley has built up that experience, but he was a gamble by Rovers and was on the brink himself at a point. But, is it that sort of, we're looking at a pool of people who've been in and around the game? Are we looking too narrowly? Because again, you can't rule out Brian Ainscoug's background of he's coached throughout America. We don't know what contacts he has.
And you'd probably know a bit more than this, and this is the stupid question that nobody wants, but like, I assume the ruling out of Kenny has already happened, probably more so from his side.
I can't see Stephen Kenny. Like, Stephen Kenny would be the dream appointment, but having turned down Bowes, I can't see him taking Dundalk. He's actually in Leeds tonight, I believe, at the Leeds-Sunderland game. So, yeah, he might be working on something over there, perhaps, or maybe he's just going to a game. But yeah, I'd be amazed. I'd be happily amazed if it was Stephen Kenny, but no, I can't see it. Maybe Johnny knows something I don't, but I don't see it being Stephen Kenny.
Probably about as much chance as me getting the job. Like, I don't know if he like, I'm sure it's come into his head. Like, Stephen Kenny's a bit of a character. I'm sure it's come into his head, and he's definitely had a little dream as to what could I achieve here at Dundalk. But like, I mean, he'd be absolutely mad to take on that job.
Yeah, I think, and that's the thing. Even like you reference people like Barrowclough, and maybe I'm wrong, but like, I look at that and I'm a Dundalk fan, but I think, God, why would you take that? You know what I mean? Like, I know, as you say, yeah, he's an assistant at Cheltenham, but like, again, you were Northern Irish manager a year or two ago. Fair enough, Cheltenham Town assistant manager isn't the biggest job in the world, but you're coming into a huge relegation scrap, and again, the upsides and stuff. And that's where, like, it
is management as well, Craig, though. Like, these opportunities are so rare. And like, Gary Crone on the podcast is like, there are too many people opposed who want to be the manager. The manager is you're the boss, like you are the Don, and
yeah,
it's a buzz. There's no doubt about it. Like, it's a massive buzz for certain people who probably will recognize that the League of Ireland has a very good reputation now relative to other years, far better. Damien Duff is managing in the league. It's gone way above where it was, and it will appeal to some people, primarily because there are so few jobs out there. But whoever takes the risk on will have to go there with his eyes wide open, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but and that's what I came back, like what I was saying earlier, that like whoever takes it, right? So say if you have the confidence, like let's say it is Barrowclough for a minute, if he keeps them up, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
If Dundalk go down, well, you'd like to think he's had the conversation.
Anyway. Yeah.
No, but he's had the conversation already with Brian Ainscough that, right, if this is unsalvageable, well, I want next year out of it. I want to take them back up, and he's almost guaranteeing himself a 3-year deal. Then that, unless it goes badly at the start of next season in the first division, he's as safe as houses. So there's not a lot of jobs in management that have that, so it's a clever, and as Johnny says, there's a complete lack of job. You look at Stephen O'Donnell, and I really do hope he gets another opportunity somewhere along the line. But straight away, there's 20 clubs in the League of Ireland if you go first division as well. 2 of them, he's not coming back to Dundalk anytime soon, and he's not coming back to Pats. So there's 18 other clubs, and some of them you can automatically rule out due to geography, etc. probably. So, beggars can't be choosers either when a position comes along.
Yeah, true.
Yep.
Well, we do always get comments in, and as always, that is in association with Malone Financial Services. Now, a lot of these I'll read very quickly, lads, because I know we've talked about a lot, but more of these are more just statements about what people felt more than questions and stuff. But Kevin Mullen said, sick feeling in my stomach all day yesterday after the news was announced. Stevie was a really good guy, and it's disappointing that it hasn't worked out as we all hoped. It's vital that we get this appointment right, and I'd like to think we have someone decent in mind. Sean O'Brien said, can't see how removing a young manager who's just appointed an extensive backroom staff and knows the league at this point in this season with no successor lined up improves our chances of staying up. The recruitment is a shit show, clearly not his fault. Davey says, you would think, given the poor start to the season, that Ainscough knew weeks ago that a change was required and a new coach has been sounded out and probably lined up to take over ASAP. If not, then why not? We as the fans knew this was coming after the Sligo defeat. Orla Crilly said, I feel really sad for Stevie. You could tell he put his heart and soul into it. There's no easy fixes for Dundalk, but a change was needed. Maybe we really concentrate on a regular starting 11 and bring training back to basics. Let's have the new manager in place within the next 3 games. And it does kind of just go on, to be honest. I could kind of rattle off 20 more, but, you know, to bring it back to kind of even the emotional side for a second, it is sad for us as fans to watch O'Donnell go and how much it did kind of fall apart from him. So kind of to really emphasize your point, Jim, I really do hope he gets another gig because, you know, he clearly has something about him. And whereas I probably don't give him as much leeway as you, because I think he does have an element of signing players and stuff like that. And the book does have to stop with him at some stage. And you have to be a better coach. I do have a lot of sympathy from him, though. I do think he probably was sold something that maybe turned out not to be what it was, and I've sympathy for that. I think he could have at times done better jobs, but ultimately he's still, as us as Dundalk fans, it's a really sad day, and he's such a legendary figure that it. But again, it did have to happen. But I kind of definitely would go with most of the guys' comments. That's, you know, it is a sad day. But again, you can see a lot of the anger there to say kind of, well, let's get this appointment right, and that's where it is important. Like.
Yeah, look, it is sad, and as Johnny rightly points out, there's a human element to this, where he does have a young family, and look, no one likes to see anyone lose work. If it was one of you guys out of work tomorrow, my heart would go out to you, and it's not football management, but you know, it's definitely sad. And look, if you want to get into the nitty gritty, and I'm not trying to bypass it, like you could criticize moments of his tenure, but that's any manager who you could criticize moments of Stephen Bradley's tenure, and he's won 4 leagues in a row. I just don't think it's the appropriate time to do that now, because ultimately a man's out of work, and I do firmly believe, like, while there were things like I never felt he knew his best 11, for example, and maybe that should be a criticism of him. I ultimately think the undoing of him was the lack of backing. You know, I think he was probably let down. He was promised things, sold a dream effectively that didn't emerge, and that was sort of out of his control. Because as I said, year one, he more than did his bit. But in terms of Stephen O'Donnell, is a great guy. I do believe he's a great coach, and look, he'll be always a legend at Oriel. Like we're coming up 10 years in October since he came back from near retirement after a really bad injury on a Good Friday to score that opener against Cork City that won the league in a night that I'll certainly never forget, and was part of, you know, captain a side to give me so many great memories. But like I made the point today, like there's been many sort of legendary former players, you know, if you go through it from Turlock O'Connor to Dermot Keeley to Martin Murray, Terry Everston, who were here as managers after their playing days, and for one reason or another, are different in a lot of their cases, you know, left the club, and very few managerial exits end sort of well, unfortunately. But I don't think it ever impacted their status and their, you know, how they were thought of as Lily White legends or Dundalk legends. And I don't think that'll be the case with Stevie O'Donnell either. I think he'll always be welcome back at Oriel, and deservedly so, because he's been an enormous and brilliant servant to the club over 2 parts of his life in terms of playing and managerial.
Yeah, and I'd have to give you a bit of credit, James, because like I've listened to a good few of your interviews, and they became increasingly hard to listen to. Like, I was at Stevie's wedding and I'd be friendly with him for a good while, and like, he loves the horses as well. We've plenty in common, and it was obvious that, you know, there was the strain was appearing in his interviews with the local press afterwards. And Dundalk is different to other clubs, where like some clubs you get a bit of an easy ride, and you don't at Dundalk. And it was tough to see, but the way he carried himself in his statement after he was let go, um, was quite interesting, because you can be sure he has something to say about this Dundalk experience that will come out down the line, and how he genuinely feels about what happened here. And you can be sure he will defend himself, but he will come out and say at some point what actually went wrong, apart from some mistakes he made, what went wrong, and what was he sold versus what he was left with.
Yeah, and I really hope he tells that story, be it with me, you, whoever. I think he should in time. Now's not the time, obviously, but you know, yeah, look, you could go through it, and obviously every manager's going to make mistakes, and particularly when results are go well, it's easy to point at different things, and look, it's easy for us standing on the sideline. But you're right, he always held himself with dignity, and you know, I can only speak for myself, because obviously there's other members of the local media probably maybe give him a bit of a harder time in of recent times in terms of the interviews, but it's never easy. It's like, no one likes, particularly someone that, you know, this wasn't, with all due respect, Jim Magilton, who had no connection to the club, or, you know, probably never going to be back again or whatever. This was a guy with real links, a real love. That wasn't, his words in his exit statement weren't just for show. He meant every single word of that. Like, heart definitely overruled head, you know, when he made that decision to leave Pats to come back here. Hindsight's a great thing. Would he do it differently? Who knows? But look, like anything in life, you have to learn from your mistakes and become better for it, and hopefully you will in whatever comes next for him.
It's funny because, like, it was said to me, there's no loyalty in football, but I do think there was a loyalty with him. Like, he's from Galway, and it pains me to hear the way that he speaks about Dundalk, when really he should be talking about Galway United in that way. Like, for me, I loved seeing him play for Galway United. He just didn't play for us very often, and the club that's close to his heart was Dundalk. And I do feel that there was an element of loyalty from he went with the romantic option of being sold, as you said, James, what he was sold, the dream, but it was a Dundalk dream, and I don't think he would have left St. Pat's for possibly any other club with the same dream, because most, I mean, as I say, the first thing I said at the start, like, I could not believe at the time that he was going to leave Pats for Dundalk. I could not believe it, and it was explained to me that maybe there was a bit of sense to it, but it doesn't make sense now.
Yeah, and look, Dundalk has that probably uncanny ability to get into your skin in that way. Like, Dermot Keely, you know, played for and managed most clubs in the League of Ireland, but would firmly consider himself a Dundalk man. Even moved here in his latter years before moving to Lanzarote, and it does, like, there's numerous examples of that where, you know, people like Steve Williams, even you know, in more recent times, came over from Wales and settled here. You know, before that, Richie Blackmore. You know, you go back through it. It just it does have that. You know, even I regularly or semi-regularly talk to like Alan O'Neill, who, you know, had a great career at Shamrock Rovers, but, you know, remembers his Dundalk days nearly more fondly. And it's that special thing about the club.
It's a football town.
It is. I'd like to see more on the ground to justify that on a Friday night, but it is. It's. I think it was Keely who said the famous phrase, something along the lines of, you know, when the club's rocking, the town's rocking, and vice versa. So, you know, it's a club who, you know, has had its low points, but ultimately as well has had massive highs as well, and it's almost a drug when it's going well, and look, this is obviously a low moment, but hopefully the only way is up. Can't go lower anyway, I don't think. Well, bar the drop, but you know,
it always can, though, sadly. But to get us going, we are going to chat about the Pats of Bows game coming up this weekend very quickly. But before we do, let's hear from our sponsors, The Unit.
Today's episode is powered by The Unit, experts in building innovative products for the betting, iGaming, and sports industries. They're the brains behind building innovative products tailored for those who love the game as much as we do. From software that powers up the betting world to platforms that enhance how we engage with our favourite sports, The Unit is leading the charge. The Unit, a winning team that reminds me of the Kenny era Dundalk in their consistency and results. Proud sponsors of the Press Box podcast. Learn more at theunit.dev.
So very quickly, would you be confident that we'll get a quick turnaround and maybe a quick jump of the players, quick confidence boost, and even get 3 points out of the 2 games now with the Burns and Gartland effect?
From my perspective, sorry, James, like you're playing Bowes at a good time. Alan Reynolds has come in, and I actually thought he's been quite frank and pragmatic. They somehow did manage to win in Galway, but their performances either side of that have been quite poor. The Pats game, I mean, Pats like have been maybe a bit slow to get going, but they're very solid. Like they've a solid back four. If Dundalk play a team at the moment that isn't going to cough up chances, I wouldn't have much hope for them. So Pat's game, I don't really see it, but generally there is a managerial bounce. There should be a managerial bounce in at least in the first sort of 2 or 3 games. But the worry for me is just watching Dundalk. The players are so low in confidence at the moment, and it's not like they resented Stephen O'Donnell as a manager. I have no experience no suggestion that was the case. To be honest, maybe the Bowes game, certainly not against Pats. I couldn't see that myself.
Look, you have to hope. I wouldn't give us a prayer for this game after Friday, just because I thought Derry were really poor, actually. They didn't have to be at all good to go out and beat us. Like, they were 4-0 up with 65 minutes, and you were fearing an absolute thumping if 4 is not a big enough one to begin with, and probably saved us a little by their substitutions, taking the likes of Duffy and Patching and a few others like that off. So look, you have to hope for a bounce. Pats probably are a prime example themselves of how you turn a corner. They weren't that spectacular at the start of the season. All of a sudden, they have a really good win over Sligo, followed up with that come from behind win against Rovers last weekend. Okay, maybe they have a bit more calibre, but you even go back to Pats last year, like they were going absolutely nowhere under Tim Clancy, took a 5-0 scalping in Oriel Park themselves at the start of last season, and John Daly comes in, and I think he had nearly more points after his appointment than anyone else if you had a mini John Daly table, and then they go on to win a cup. So that's easier said than done, of course, but that's what the belief has to be right now, that you can turn that around. You know, even speaking to the Derry guys up there the other night, and they were saying, you know, who is there if you get rid of Stephen O'Donnell? But I made the point to them, and they went up to Dalymount, and it was a team led by Derek Pender actually who beat them that night in Dalymount. And I said, would they have lost that game if Declan Devine was still in charge of Bowes? Ultimately, we'd never know, but you have to speculate maybe they wouldn't have. So you have to hope for that bounce, whether it comes or not. Look, it won't be easy, but this is where I think everyone needs to sort of come together. Oriel was a fortress for Stephen O'Donnell for most of his reign, and it needs to be again now on Friday. Make it difficult, because it's not a nice venue to come to. I don't think the weather is due to be great, so it's not going to be, no one's going to be looking forward to it, but, you know, get behind the team. I know Brian Garton in particular has taken an absolute rollicking of abuse this week, and I heard some of it was, I haven't spoke to him myself, so I can't confirm this, but I believe some of it happened when his family were present, which is absolutely wrong on all levels, and shouldn't be condoned. But he's in charge of this side now on Friday night, along with Liam Burns. let's hope they find something. Let's hope to give a little bit of spark to this team. Let's, it'll more than likely be a very short tenure for them in terms of the interim management role. And let's hope it's a good one. There's, I remember after the Trevor Anderson era, Ollie Ralph came in and a good couple of results. And sorry, that was after the Martin Murray era. And then after Trevor Anderson, Paul Curran came in, and Paul still lives locally and would still brag about having 100% record from his 2 matches in charge. So there's, there's evidence there through the years of interims getting a bit of a bounce off teams. And okay, that's historical, but we can but hope that these lads do it as well.
I'd also just to say, like, Robbie Benson interview will be interesting tomorrow. Now, I'm not going to be able to be part of that or whatever, but I'd love Stephen O'Donnell to manage Go United at some stage. I'd absolutely love it, and nothing has changed in that regard.
Well, for our game against Sligo in the showgrounds, which potentially a new man could be in charge, it was actually scheduled for Saturday, April 20th. It's actually been brought forward 24 hours to Friday, April 19th now at 7:45. Before we go, we'll just chat to Johnny a small bit after, just about his own podcast, and we'll give you a bit of a plug, Johnny. But we're going to just bring you some underage updates in association with Jerry McNamee Consultants. So it wasn't a great weekend for the underage sides either, with both the women's under 17s and men's under 15s shipping 4 goals on Saturday. The women's 17s lost 4-0 away to Shamrock Rovers, while the men's 15s lost 4-1 away to Pats, with Hugh Martin getting the consolation. The men's 17s also lost 2-0 at home to Bray on Sunday, while the men's 14s were the sole winners with a 2-0 win at home to Drogheda. The men's under 20s had their games on Saturday against Finn Harps called off. This weekend on Saturday, the women's 17s are going to host Longford Town at 4 p.m, while the men's 15s are in action beforehand at 1 p.m. against Derry City. On Sunday, the women's 19s are away to Bows at 12, while the 17s are away to Derry City at 2 p.m. The men's under 14s are also in action at 2 p.m. as they travel to Finn Harps. I normally actually let you do that, Jim. And you can definitely do that next week. But before we do go, Johnny, thanks so much again for coming on. So again, for anybody not listening or is listening, don't forget to subscribe to Johnny's and Dan's podcast as LOI Central on Twitter and Instagram and stuff. But how's the podcast going for you in general? It's really picked up over the last few years as well for you.
Yeah, we're 8 years in now. Sorry if there's a little bit of noise in the background there. Just let me see if I can mute this. We're 8 years in, and when I got involved, I'd have, just to bring this back to Dundalk, lads. One of the reasons I got involved in this podcast was I went to some of the Dundalk away games in was it 2016, and I felt that there was a chance that the League of Ireland could really take off. And I got more of a buzz from watching Dundalk that season than practically any club that I've actually been involved with myself, because I was very, very proud of being involved in the League of Ireland, and I felt it was something that you were trying to push for, this revolution. It's almost like kind of wanting United Ireland to happen, something you dream of, and you want the League of Ireland to actually take its place among the football nations of the world, and it still hasn't quite done that. But I felt at that time, watching the way that they carried themselves in Warsaw and in Holland and so on and so forth, and they could do it without any really help from the FAI. I thought the League of Ireland was going somewhere, and at the same time, I'm almost still taken aback by the explosion of interest in the last few years. And I think we should pat ourselves on the back at times, because we're doing this primarily out of love. Like, we're not doing it to make money. And podcasts like this one, I have to say, I really enjoy listening to your podcast. And I'm not a big podcast fan, but this season, as things got bad, I was always interested to see what you were saying. And I think the podcasts and social media in general have been brilliant for the League of Ireland. And I'm delighted that we're still 8 years in. Our sponsors have been great, but it's just amazing how it's taken off. I know Damien Duff has had an awful lot to do with it, but like, you look at the buzz around, like, I've always, you know what amazes me? I'm in Inchicore an hour before a game, and there's people queuing to get in. There's literally nothing in the ground. Like, there's nothing. There's no bar. There's no coffee shop. There's absolutely nothing, and people are queuing to get in. Kids with their parents. So it's like, how did this happen? Like, more people now at a women's game in the League of Ireland than there would have been at the males equivalent only a few years ago, and it's great to see.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I definitely Agree with you on the rise of the League of Ireland. I think all of us secretly, there's probably a million now League of Ireland podcasts and stuff around for different clubs and stuff. But I think ultimately it is true love for all of us, and we all do see the bigger picture. I think even for me, the other week seeing Rovers and Bows with a 10,000 seater all sold out and on telly, like, you do get a buzz out of that. And you do think for our club and for other clubs in the League of Ireland, you do think we can have that and we can make this a league that's worth. I know you're always going on about like TV deals and stuff like that, but like if we had proper backing and stadium and infrastructure, the league is a brilliant league and it is well supported. And again, like, I'm a Man United fan and I would go over the odd time to see a Man United game, but there's nothing like having that on your doorstep. And I think whether COVID has affected that, Brexit or whatever, attendances are up. And you're right. But very few stadiums have, grown, or like Richmond, you're referencing, like, Richmond's as bad as Oriel. Like, so like, but yet there's still a buzz because the football has improved and stuff. But like it's the League of Ireland is something that I think it used to be this kind of cool niche thing. And it's not now. A lot of people will talk about it now in general and will understand. And I think the coverage has grown. And I have to say, yeah, right. I think all of us should potentially give ourselves some sort of a pat on the back, because all this sort of stuff, us spending our evenings doing it, is helping the league grow. And
it is. And like Dan and I, to be honest, like, and this has been said to me, I think we're nearly more influential on Off the Ball on a Saturday because you have 140,000 people there, most of whom are probably like Premier League fans listening in, or people in the car. And like I was at a meat counter in Roscommon on Saturday, getting the train back, and this fella like is a podcast fan. I was in Roscommon town, so like something is happening, and we're too hard on ourselves in terms of crowds, lads. Like Sligo Rovers in Dundalk, I've said this a million times. The crowds that Sligo and Dundalk get for the size of the town, you'd be proud of that anywhere. We're too inclined to look at the leagues in England and say we should be like that. Crowds in the League of Ireland are really not, relatively speaking, are not that bad. What we need to do is to grow the league that every corner of Ireland has some sort of link to it, or some sort of pyramid pathway. And that's a long, long way away. But we've a lot to be proud of. We really do. And I've never been as proud of it as I am at the moment.
Jimmy, you're happy to continue going. You're putting all this effort into, reporting on Dundalk every week, but I suppose you probably never get a pat on the back as well. So, you're doing your bit to help promote the League of Ireland as well, boy.
I'm just thinking he's forgetting about John Caulfield's association with Roscommon.
There you go, actually,
yeah. Your manager and Cork's all-time leading scorer, I think, as Roscommon. But no, look, the podcasts are great. I know myself. I sometimes dread doing this one, but you miss them when they're not there, the other ones, because I know, like, I'd be a regular listener to a lot of them, and there in the off season you're going out for your walk or whatever, and you're wondering, what am I listening to now? It's when they're not in your library on a Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or whatever morning. It's you definitely do miss them. So yeah, they're brilliant to have.
Right, but we'll leave it there again. Thanks a million, Johnny, for coming on. But again, we want to thank our main sponsors, the unit, our associate sponsors, PlayerFit, Jerry McNamee Consultants, and Malone Financial Services. And again, if you're listening on YouTube, we want to thank Mullens for helping us get set up. And don't forget to subscribe to the Press Box on YouTube as well. So we leave it there. Stephen O'Donnell, sadly, his contribution to the club will always be remembered, but he has now moved on, so we wish him the best, and then we hope Dundalk can improve from here. We'll talk to you next week.